Welcome to Mystery Cafe, your ultimate stop for gripping detective stories, chilling mysteries, and unforgettable investigations. Here, every video serves a fresh dose of suspense, shocking twists, and cases that challenge your inner detective. From classic whodunits to modern crime stories, we bring the world of mystery straight to your screen, where every clue matters and no secret stays buried for long. Before we start unraveling today's mystery, we'd love to know, where are you watching from? Globe showing Europe, Africa. Drop your country, city, or stay in the comments, and let's see how far the Mystery Cafe family reaches. Magnifying glass tilted right.
The Case of the Vanishing Heiress. Chapter 1, The Midnight Caller. It was one of those New York nights when the city never quite sleeps. The traffic hummed below West 35th Street, and inside Nero Wolfe's brownstone, the air was heavy with the earthy scent of orchids. Wolfe was upstairs, of course, tending to his precious greenhouse, while I, Archie Goodwin, his overworked and underpaid assistant, was downstairs, trying to decide between opening a beer or the evening paper. That's when the doorbell rang. It wasn't the casual ring of a delivery boy or a neighbor. It was firm, twice in succession, the kind that said, "This is important." I opened the door to find a woman standing there, wrapped in a dark blue coat, eyes wide and tired, like she hadn't slept in days. "Mr. Wolfe?" she asked breathlessly. "Not quite. I'm Archie Goodwin. The man you're looking for rarely moves more than a few feet unless threatened with starvation." She managed a faint smile. "Then I suppose you're the one who decides if I can see him?" "That depends on whether you're here to sell him orchids or confess to murder." "He's not fond of either. I'm here because I believe my sister has been kidnapped." That did it. I led her inside. She introduced herself as Diana Kersey, daughter of Malcolm Kersey, the late steel tycoon whose name was still on half the buildings in Pittsburgh. Her sister, Evelyn Kersey, was 22, the younger of the two, last seen leaving a charity gala 3 nights ago. "She left with a man," Diana said, "but no one knows who he was. The police think she ran off. But Evelyn would never." Her voice broke, and I slid a box of tissues across Wolfe's desk. "You filed a missing persons report?" "Yes, but they don't take it seriously. They say she's of age and impulsive." I raised an eyebrow. "And you think she didn't go willingly?" "I know she didn't. Evelyn was set to inherit our father's estate next week, $10 million in cash and control of Kersey Holdings. If she disappears, it goes to me." That got Wolfe's attention. I heard the familiar creak of the elevator and his thunderous voice echo down the hall. "Archie, stop interrogating the lady like a district attorney and show her in." Wolfe entered the office, 280 pounds of genius wrapped in silk and disdain. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes darted to the woman like a hawk sizing up prey. "Miss Kersey," he said, settling into his custom armchair. "You believe your sister has been abducted for profit?" "I do." "Do you have proof?" She hesitated, then reached into her handbag and produced a folded envelope. Inside was a note, typed, unsigned, and brief. "Keep quiet if you value her life. No police. Wait for instructions." Wolfe studied it, nostrils flaring. "No demand for ransom. Curious. Mr. Goodwin, note the lack of postmark, hand-delivered." I nodded. "Probably slipped under the door or left with a doorman." Wolfe sighed. "Miss Kersey, I charge a flat retainer. $10,000 in advance, plus expenses." She nodded without hesitation and signed a check. "Very well," he said. Archie, cancel all appointments for tomorrow. This is our only engagement. By the time she left, Wolfe was already deep in thought. I knew the look, eyes half closed, lips pressed tight, his brain dissecting every word, every pause, every shadow in the room. He finally spoke. There is deceit here, Archie. The sister fears more than the loss of her kin. Either she suspects the motive but dares not speak it, or she is the motive. Meaning? She inherits if Evelyn disappears. If I were inclined to cynicism, I would say she's paying us to prove herself innocent. I leaned back in my chair. That's cold, even for you. Facts are cold, Wolfe muttered. An hour later, I hit the streets. My first stop was the Waldorf Hastings Hotel, where the charity gala had been held. The manager remembered Evelyn, stunning, polite, always smiling. She'd left around 11:45 with a man in a gray tuxedo. No one had caught his face. Outside the hotel, I noticed a valet pacing near the curb, smoking nervously. He told me he'd parked Evelyn's car, a silver Packard, but she never came back for it. When I showed him her photo, he frowned. I saw her leave, yeah. She looked uneasy. The guy she was with had his hand on her arm. Tight. You get a license plate? He shook his head. But his car was dark green, a Lincoln Continental. Private plate. Couldn't read it. That was something. I took his name and number and slipped him a 10 for his trouble. Back at the brownstone, I reported everything. Wolfe grunted. A green Lincoln, a vanished heiress, and a sister with too much money. Pfah. I despise melodrama. Then you picked the wrong career. He glared at me. Nonsense. I chose precisely the right one. The world comes to me, Archie, not the other way around. The trick is knowing which part of it lies. He closed his eyes, murmuring softly to himself. Evelyn Kersey, gray tuxedo, green Lincoln, no ransom. Then, as if struck by inspiration, he sat up sharply. Archie, tomorrow you'll visit the Kersey residence. Speak to the housekeeper, the chauffeur, and the sister again. Bring back details, personal ones. Who Evelyn trusted, who she feared, who benefits from her absence. He paused, his tone lower, darker. And Archie, take care. If I'm right, this isn't a kidnapping. It's a cover-up. Chapter 2, Shadows in the Estate. The next morning, I was on the road before Wolfe's breakfast tray had even left the kitchen. Fritz, our resident chef and miracle worker, nearly fainted when he realized I was skipping coffee. But when Nero Wolfe says, be at the Kersey residence by 10, you don't argue, not unless you enjoy lectures on punctuality and moral decay. The Kersey estate was on the edge of Long Island, one of those sprawling old money homes that looked like they belonged in a Fitzgerald novel. The mansion sat behind iron gates, its gravel drive lined with elm trees shedding the last of their leaves. A butler opened the door before I even rang the bell, tall and rigid as a broomstick. Miss Diana Kersey is expecting you, he said in a voice that could have frozen champagne. Inside, the house was silent except for the faint tick of an antique clock. Paintings of stern-faced ancestors stared down from every wall, their eyes following me like they knew I didn't belong. Diana entered the parlor, dressed in a charcoal dress that looked a size too large for her. Thank you for coming, Mr. Goodwin, she said quietly. Have you found anything? Not yet, I replied. But Wolfe believes the answer lies closer to home than you think. Mind if I look around? She hesitated, then nodded. I'll have Mrs. Larkin, our housekeeper, assist you. Mrs. Larkin appeared moments later, a round, nervous woman with kind eyes and a habit of wringing her apron. "Oh, Miss Evelyn," she murmured when I mentioned the missing sister. "Such a sweet girl. Always reading those travel books and saying she'd see the world someday. Did she ever mention any particular man?" I asked. The housekeeper glanced at Diana before answering. "There was one. Mr. Brandt. Came around a few times after Mr. Malcolm passed. Charming, well-dressed. Miss Evelyn seemed fond of him. Do you know his first name? Julian, I think. But Miss Diana didn't care for him. She lowered her voice. Said he was after money." I turned to Diana, who was suddenly studying the carpet like it held the secrets of the universe. "Care to confirm that?" "I didn't trust him," she admitted. "Julian Brandt. He runs a chain of luxury car dealerships. Too smooth, too rehearsed. I told Evelyn he was dangerous." "When was the last time you saw him?" "The night of the gala. He sent a car to pick her up, but he didn't attend. I thought that was strange." It was strange. And getting stranger by the minute. After thanking Mrs. Larkin, I asked to see Evelyn's room. The door was slightly ajar, and stepping inside felt like walking into a photograph, everything untouched, perfectly arranged, frozen in time. Perfume lingered in the air, light and floral. A silk scarf hung over a mirror. On the writing desk sat an open book, The Romance of Travel, with a plain ticket stub tucked inside. One way to Montreal, dated 2 weeks earlier. Wolfe would love that. I examined the drawer and found a stack of letters tied with a ribbon. The top one was from Julian Brandt. His handwriting was bold, the tone affectionate but controlling. "You must trust me, darling. There are forces around you that wish to harm us. Leave when I say, not before." The next letter was shorter. "Destroy the others. Someone is watching." I pocketed the note and the ticket, then spotted something curious, a photograph on the nightstand. Evelyn and Diana, smiling beside their father's vintage Rolls-Royce. Behind them, faintly visible, stood a man in a gray tuxedo. The same tuxedo described by the valet. The face was half in shadow, but I'd bet my last dollar it was Julian Brandt. Back downstairs, I asked the butler if Evelyn had received any visitors recently. His expression flickered, just for a second. "Only a courier 2 nights ago," he said. "Delivered a small package. Miss Diana signed for it." I turned to her. "Package?" She stiffened. "A perfume bottle. From Paris. Evelyn ordered it weeks ago." The butler cleared his throat. "If I may, Miss Diana, the parcel came unmarked. No return address. That got my attention. Mind if I see it?" "It's in her room," she said quickly. "I can fetch it." She left the room, heels clicking briskly against the marble floor. I glanced at the butler. "Tell me something, did you see who delivered it?" He nodded. "Yes. A man in a green car. When I got back to the brownstone that evening, Wolfe was exactly where I'd left him, seated behind his desk, surrounded by the smell of beer, cigars, and disapproval. "Report," he said simply. I laid the evidence on the desk, the letter, the ticket stub, and the photograph. Evelyn was seeing a man named Julian Brandt. She had a one-way ticket to Montreal. The night she vanished, a package arrived, unmarked, delivered by someone driving a green car. Wolfe leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Ah. The Lincoln. Exactly. The butler saw it himself. And Brant fits the tuxedo description. Wolfe rubbed his chin. A dangerous man, this Mr. Brant. Did the sister seem cooperative? She seemed selective with the truth. When I asked about the package, she changed the subject. He took the letter and read it aloud. Destroy the others. Someone is watching. He frowned. Mr. Brant fears surveillance, or he wishes to create the illusion of it. Meaning? Meaning he may have planted the notion that Evelyn was in danger to isolate her. Classic predatory control tactic. But the question remains, where is she now? I shrugged. Could be Montreal. Could be the Hudson River. Pessimism doesn't become you, Archie. Fetch the directory. Let us see if Mr. Brant operates his dealership under his own name. I flipped through the business listings and found it, Brant Motors, Midtown. Wolfe dictated a call to the operator, and within minutes, we had confirmation. Julian Brant owned 3 showrooms across the city and lived at the Park Meridian Apartments. Splendid, Wolfe said. Tomorrow, you will pay him a visit. You think he'll talk? He will, if you ask the right questions. And if he doesn't, watch his eyes. They reveal what words conceal. I was halfway to the door when Fritz appeared with a tray of roast beef sandwiches. For Mr. Wolfe, he said. And for you, if you promise not to eat like a barbarian. Fritz, I said, taking one, I make no promises I can't keep. As Wolfe ate, he spoke between bites. Archie, this case is not about ransom. It is about power, control of a fortune, and perhaps revenge. Miss Diana is not telling us everything, and Mr. Brant may be telling her nothing. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. By tomorrow, we'll know which of them is the hunter, and which is the prey. Chapter 3, The Man in the Gray Tuxedo. The morning traffic on Madison Avenue was already bad enough to sour a saint. I'd barely made it out of the brownstone before Wolfe's voice echoed behind me, Archie. Do not attempt charm, it wastes time. He needn't have worried. Julian Brant didn't strike me as the kind of man easily charmed. Brant Motors occupied a corner showroom of glass and steel, filled with more polished chrome than a movie star's smile. Cars gleamed under spotlights like caged panthers, each one tagged with a price that could make a banker sweat. Inside, a sales clerk in a sharp vest tried to greet me, but I flashed my private investigator license. That usually cleared the crowd faster than a fire drill. Mr. Brant in? I asked. The clerk hesitated. He's with a client. Tell him Archie Goodwin's here on behalf of Nero Wolfe. That did the trick. The name carried weight in New York, usually the kind that made people nervous. Within minutes, I was ushered into a private office at the back of the showroom. The room smelled of leather and ambition. Julian Brant rose from behind a walnut desk. Tall, immaculate, and too self-aware, he looked like he'd stepped out of a fashion spread. Gray eyes, smooth voice, not a wrinkle on his tailored suit. But there was something rehearsed about the way he smiled, as if he'd practiced sincerity in front of a mirror. Mr. Goodwin, he said pleasantly. To what do I owe the honor? You know why I'm here. Evelyn Kersey. His jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. You've spoken with her sister. Among others. Evelyn's missing, and you're the last known gentleman in her company. He gave a soft chuckle that didn't reach his eyes. Gentleman? That's generous. I was fond of Evelyn, yes. But she's impulsive, always chasing adventures. I imagine she's off on one now. I leaned against the desk. Interesting theory. Her car's still at the Waldorf. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened to my report without interrupting, his eyes closed, hands folded over his considerable stomach. When I finished, he said, "You've confirmed my suspicion." "Which one?" "You've got a shelf full. That Miss Evelyn's disappearance is not a crime of passion. It's business. The mention of debts and papers suggests leverage. She may have uncovered something her father concealed, a secret worth killing for. Or selling," I added. "Indeed. Brandt's fear of Detective Miller indicates official involvement. Perhaps corruption, perhaps protection. Either way, he's entangled." Wolfe opened his eyes and leaned forward. "Archie, we need information on this Detective Miller. His precinct, his record, his acquaintances. I'll make a few calls. And, Archie, discreetly. If Brandt's suspects were following that thread, it may snap." 2 hours later, after a few favors and one expensive lunch bribe, I had my answer. Detective Roy Miller, NYPD's Organized Crime Division. A reputation for efficiency and a taste for quiet deals. He'd been investigating fraudulent contracts tied to industrial suppliers, and one of those suppliers just happened to be Kersey Steel Holdings. When I told Wolfe, his reaction was swift. "Excellent. The web tightens. Kersey's fortune was built on corruption, Miller was investigating it, and Evelyn stumbled onto the truth. Brandt was likely her intermediary, lover or not. Where does that leave Diana? In the dark, or pretending to be?" He leaned back again. "Archie, arrange for Miss Kersey to visit us tonight. I shall require candor." At 7 sharp, Diana Kersey arrived, looking every bit the fragile heiress, soft voice, elegant posture, but a shadow behind her eyes. Wolfe didn't waste time. "Miss Kersey," he began, "your father's dealings were under investigation by the police. Were you aware?" Her lips parted. "No. That's impossible. Father was a respected—" "Spare me the eulogies," Wolfe said dryly. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened to my report without interrupting, his eyes closed, hands folded over his considerable stomach. When I finished, he said, "You've confirmed my suspicion." "Which one?" "You've got a shelf full. That Miss Evelyn's disappearance is not a crime of passion. It's business. The mention of debts and papers suggests leverage. She may have uncovered something her father concealed, a secret worth killing for. Or selling," I added. "Indeed. Brandt's fear of Detective Miller indicates official involvement. Perhaps corruption, perhaps protection. Either way, he's entangled." Wolfe opened his eyes and leaned forward. "Archie, we need information on this Detective Miller. His precinct, his record, his acquaintances. I'll make a few calls. And, Archie, discreetly. If Brandt's suspects were following that thread, it may snap." 2 hours later, after a few favors and one expensive lunch bribe, I had my answer. Detective Roy Miller, NYPD's Organized Crime Division. A reputation for efficiency and a taste for quiet deals. He'd been investigating fraudulent contracts tied to industrial suppliers, and one of those suppliers just happened to be Kersey Steel Holdings. When I told Wolfe, his reaction was swift. "Excellent. The web tightens. Kersey's fortune was built on corruption, Miller was investigating it, and Evelyn stumbled onto the truth. Brandt was likely her intermediary, lover or not. Where does that leave Diana? In the dark, or pretending to be? He leaned back again. Archie, arrange for Miss Kersey to visit us tonight. I shall require candor. At 7 sharp, Diana Kersey arrived, looking every bit the fragile heiress, soft voice, elegant posture, but a shadow behind her eyes. Wolfe didn't waste time. Miss Kersey, he began, your father's dealings were under investigation by the police. Were you aware? Her lips parted. No. That's impossible. Father was a respected. Spare me the eulogies, Wolfe said dryly. Detective Miller believes otherwise. And your sister, I suspect, discovered proof. Diana's composure faltered. If that's true, then she's in danger. Yes, Wolfe said, from those who profited by her silence. She clutched the armrest. You think Julian? I think, Wolfe interrupted, that Julian Brant knows far more than he admits. But whether he's the hunter or the hound remains unclear. She lowered her gaze. If Evelyn's alive, I'll do anything to bring her back. Be careful, Wolfe said softly. Declarations of devotion have a way of sounding like confessions. She looked up sharply, but he was already signaling to Fritz for coffee. When she left, Wolfe sat motionless for a long while. Then he spoke, more to himself than to me. There is a missing element, Archie, something small yet vital. The package, the ticket, the letters, all pieces of misdirection. The truth, I think, arrived at that house in that box. The perfume bottle? He nodded slowly. Find it. The next morning, I was back on Long Island before the dew had dried. Mrs. Larkin looked surprised but not unhappy to see me. That bottle, I said. The one delivered 2 nights before Evelyn vanished. I need to see it. She led me upstairs to Evelyn's room and opened the dresser drawer. The bottle was still there, crystal, elegant, and nearly full. I uncorked it, sniffed once, and recoiled. Smells like almonds, I muttered. Mrs. Larkin frowned. It's supposed to be jasmine. Not this batch, I said grimly. Almond scent, bitter almonds, means cyanide. Chapter 4, Poison and Promises. I stood there in Evelyn Kersey's bedroom, the bottle of perfume catching the morning light like a guilty jewel. The scent was faint, but unmistakable, bitter almonds, the silent whisper of cyanide. Mrs. Larkin, I said, no one else has handled this bottle since it arrived? Only Miss Diana, she replied nervously. She opened the package to check for damage. Miss Evelyn never even touched it, she was out that night. That little detail hit me like a hammer. The package had arrived 2 nights before Evelyn vanished. She'd been gone when it was delivered. Which meant someone expected her to return and use it. I corked the bottle carefully and wrapped it in a handkerchief. Mrs. Larkin, don't mention this to anyone, not even Miss Kersey. I'll take it with me, it might be the clue we've been waiting for. Her hands trembled as she nodded. Do you think it was meant to hurt her? I didn't answer. Because the truth was already written across the glass in invisible ink. When I returned to the brownstone, Wolfe was in his chair, reading the morning paper and eating corned beef hash like civilization depended on it. I set the perfume bottle on his desk. He looked up, eyebrows arching. Ah. You found the box's secret. More like its stench. Cyanide, I'd bet my hat. He leaned forward, sniffed the air near the stopper, then sat back with a grim smile. Indeed. A simple, elegant method. Fatal in minutes. Miss Evelyn was expected to apply it, perhaps before an event, and collapse gracefully in public. Someone went to a lot of trouble, I said. Poison perfume, no ransom note, and a vanishing act that points in every direction. You think Diana ordered it? Possibly. But too obvious. Miss Diana is intelligent enough to know suspicion clings to airs like lint to wool. I believe she is frightened, not guilty. Then who mailed it? Not mailed, Wolfe corrected. Delivered by hand, recall. In a green car. Which we know belonged to Julian Brandt. I groaned. So we're back to Mr. Smoothtalk himself. Exactly. But our handsome entrepreneur lacks subtlety. If he intended to kill her, he would not resort to perfume bottles. He would prefer something theatrical, a disappearing yacht, perhaps. So what's his angle? That, Wolfe said, we shall determine tonight. At 8 that evening, we drove, to the Park Meridian Apartments. That alone told me how serious Wolfe was. Getting him to leave the brownstone required more persuasion than a Senate hearing. He claimed fresh air was overrated, and taxis unsanitary. When we reached the building, Wolfe adjusted his hat, muttering, I despise elevators. They're too confining for thought. Brandt's penthouse suite was sleek and quiet, all black leather and glass. He seemed surprised to see us. Mr. Wolfe, he said, extending a hand. An honor. Though I can't imagine what brings you here at this hour. Curiosity, Wolfe replied. A professional ailment. You see, I dislike incomplete pictures, and yours, Mr. Brandt, is distressingly smudged. Brandt's composure flickered. I've told you everything I know. On the contrary, Wolfe said mildly, you've told me everything useful to yourself. A subtle distinction. He pulled the perfume bottle from his pocket and set it on the glass table. Brandt froze. Where did you get that? It was delivered to the Kersey estate, by someone in a green Lincoln. The same make and color you drive. I had nothing to do with that, Brandt snapped. I didn't send any perfume. Wolfe's tone was calm, but his words hit like gunfire. Then perhaps you can explain why your fingerprints are on the cap. That landed. Brandt's face went pale. How do you? I didn't need to, Wolfe said smoothly. Mr. Goodwin noticed them earlier. That was a lie, but it worked. Brandt's shoulders sagged. She asked me to order it, he said quietly. Evelyn. She said it was her favorite scent. I had it delivered from Paris. I folded my arms. And conveniently poisoned in the process? His voice rose. I swear I didn't know. Someone must have switched it. Someone with access, Wolfe mused. Perhaps your assistant? He hesitated. Gloria? No, she wouldn't. But his voice betrayed him. When we left, Wolfe was silent until we reached the car. Then he said, Archie, tomorrow you will visit that assistant, Mississippi Gloria Lane. Be charming, but observant. You think she's involved? I think, he said, adjusting his coat, that she's the only person Brandt truly underestimates. And that makes her dangerous. The next morning, I arrived at Brandt Motors just as the showroom opened. Gloria Lane was there, dressed smartly, clipboard in hand, eyes sharp enough to cut glass. Mr. Brandt isn't in, she said coolly. If you're here to buy a car, I can recommend something that suits your style, fast, loud, and likely to crash. Tempting, I said. But I'm here about Evelyn Kersey. Her smile faded. I told the police everything. I don't know where she is. Funny, I said, because your boss seems to think you know more than you're saying. That got her attention. He said that? Not in so many words. But he did mention you handled his international shipments, including a certain order from Paris. Her hand trembled slightly on the clipboard. Perfume? Exactly. She set the clipboard down slowly. I arranged the import, yes. But I didn't send it. Julian insisted on inspecting it first. Then he told me to handle the details. It was already sealed when I picked it up. Where? She hesitated. At a warehouse near the docks. He said it was his private supplier, but the label was strange. Strange how? The sender's mark was a black triangle with a number, 47C. I wrote it down. Doesn't sound like Chanel. No, she said softly. It sounded military. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe's eyebrows shot up when I reported. A black triangle, you say? Curious. That is the insignia once used by a European chemical supplier during the war, later dissolved, but rumored to trade through intermediaries. Meaning Brandt's perfume came from a poison factory. Precisely. Whether he knew it or not. He tapped his fingers together, lost in thought. We are nearing the heart of this, Archie. Miss Evelyn did not vanish by chance, she vanished to avoid being found. The question is, was the poison intended for her, or for someone else? I frowned. Diana? Or Brandt himself? Poison makes a convenient signature, when you wish to frame someone else. He leaned back, eyes gleaming. Find that warehouse. Tonight. By dusk, I was at the docks, flashlight in hand, the air thick with salt and diesel. The warehouse marked 47C loomed like a skeleton against the skyline. Its door was unlocked. Inside, the floor was scattered with crates labeled fragrance materials, Paris export. And then, near the back, I found it, a single open crate filled not with perfume, but with glass vials marked caution, hydrogen cyanide. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. Looking for something, Mr. Goodwin? The voice was female, calm, deliberate. I turned. Gloria Lane stood in the doorway, holding a revolver. Chapter 5, The Woman with the Gun. The metallic click of the revolver sounded loud in the still air of the warehouse. My flashlight beam wobbled slightly as I turned it toward the voice. Gloria Lane stood there in her gray coat, one hand steady on the trigger, the other clutching her handbag. The light caught the edge of her face, pale, determined, and scared all at once. Easy now, I said. Guns make people nervous, and nervous people make mistakes. Step away from the crate, she ordered. I'd love to. But maybe you can tell me why you're pointing that thing at me before I move? She hesitated, then gestured with the revolver. Because you shouldn't be here. This isn't your fight. I'm flattered you care about my well-being, I said lightly. But you're the one standing in a warehouse full of cyanide. Her voice tightened. You don't understand. This isn't what it looks like. Sure it isn't, I said. It never is, until someone ends up dead. Now how about lowering the gun before you prove my point? For a moment, I thought she might. Then her jaw set. Julian didn't tell you everything, she said. He couldn't. I took a slow step forward. Try me. She sighed, and the tension in her shoulders wavered. Those crates aren't from his company. They're part of something bigger, a chemical deal his business got dragged into. Evelyn found out. She came to me for help. That froze me. Evelyn? You saw her? Yes. The night she disappeared. She came to the dealership after hours. She said someone was watching her. She had papers, company ledgers, shipment lists. She wanted me to hide them. And did you? I did better. I helped her disappear. The gun wavered, just slightly. I switched her identification with a client's file and sent her out on the freight line to Montreal. She's safe, or she was when I last heard. I took another step closer. You expect me to believe you risked your job and your neck for a woman you barely knew? She didn't deserve to die for someone else's greed, Gloria said. And I was tired of covering for Julian. I nodded toward the crates. He's into smuggling, isn't he? Chemicals, yes, through shell suppliers. When Evelyn threatened to expose him, he panicked. That perfume bottle was supposed to be her farewell gift. Poisoned? She nodded. But I swapped the vials before it left the warehouse. That's why she's alive. That admission hit me like a sucker punch. You saved her life, then framed yourself doing it. She gave a bitter smile. It's what happens when you try to play hero in a room full of villains. A sudden sound broke the tension, a door creaking somewhere behind the crates. Gloria's eyes widened. Someone's here, she whispered. I turned off the flashlight. The darkness swallowed us whole. Footsteps approached, slow and deliberate. I could just make out the outline of a man, broad-shouldered, moving with purpose. Then came the low growl of a voice I recognized. Mississippi Lane, Julian Brandt said, stepping into view. You've disappointed me. He didn't see me, not yet. Gloria lifted the gun, but he was faster. His arm swung out, a glint of metal, and the shot echoed through the warehouse. She staggered, the revolver clattering to the floor. I lunged forward and hit him square in the jaw. He went down hard, but not for long. We grappled in the dark, boots crunching on broken glass. Another shot rang out, wild. I caught his wrist and twisted until the pistol dropped. By the time I reached the light switch, the fight was over. Brandt was sprawled unconscious against a crate, blood on his lip. Gloria was on the ground, clutching her arm, pale but breathing. I knelt beside her. You're lucky he's a lousy shot. She gave a shaky laugh. You should see his aim with a contract. Save your jokes. We're getting you out of here. 2 hours later, Wolfe's office smelled of antiseptic and roasted duck, Fritz's way of celebrating survival. Gloria sat in one of the guest chairs, her arm bandaged, her nerves frayed. Wolfe stared at her like a man inspecting an unfamiliar species. So, he said, you smuggled a frightened heiress out of the country, substituted poison to prevent her murder, and failed to inform the authorities. Admirable in intention, idiotic in execution. She trusted me, Gloria said softly. Foolish girl, Wolfe murmured. And yet, your actions confirm one point, Evelyn Kersey is alive. That simplifies matters. Not for long, I said. Brandt's operation won't take this kindly. He'll not be operating anything for several days, Wolfe said. The police will find him nursing a fractured jaw beside several crates of contraband. You were thorough, Archie. Down to the fingerprints. Splendid. Wolfe leaned back, eyes half closed. Now we must draw out the spider behind this web. Brant is too crude to be the true mastermind. His involvement in chemical smuggling required financing and protection. Gloria frowned. You mean someone higher up? Exactly, Wolfe said. Someone with access to money, legal shields, and perhaps a personal stake in silencing Evelyn. She looked puzzled. Who else could that be? I didn't need Wolfe to answer. The name hung in the air like smoke. Diana, I said. Gloria stared. Her own sister? Wolfe nodded. Motives come in layers. She feared losing control of the inheritance, or exposure if her father's dealings implicated her. Either way, she needed Evelyn gone but not dead, just invisible. That would explain why she paid us so easily, I said. It wasn't to find Evelyn, it was to make sure we didn't. Precisely, Wolfe said. But she underestimated me, as all deceivers do. Gloria swallowed. What will you do? Wolfe said, arching an eyebrow. I shall do nothing. Mr. Goodwin, however, will invite Miss Kersey here tomorrow under the pretense of new information. When she arrives, we shall see whether guilt makes her perspire. Later that night, after Gloria left under police protection, I lingered in Wolfe's office. He was back to his beer, staring at the fireplace like it was a suspect refusing to talk. You really think Diana planned the whole thing? I asked. She orchestrated enough to be dangerous, Wolfe said. But not enough to be clever. There is a difference. He took a long sip of beer. Evelyn Kersey will be found, perhaps with our help, perhaps without it. The more interesting question, Archie, is not who vanished, but why she had to vanish at all. Because her family's rotten? Because, he said softly, she chose to expose them, and in doing so, she exposed herself. The price of integrity, as history teaches, is often exile. I shook my head. You're getting philosophical. He smiled faintly. Nonsense. I'm getting indigestion. Fritz's duck was underseasoned. The next morning, I placed a call to Diana Kersey's estate. Her secretary answered, brittle as ever. Miss Kersey is indisposed. May I take a message? Tell her Nero Wolfe has recovered a personal item belonging to her sister. She'll want to come in person. That did the trick. Within the hour, she called back. Mr. Goodwin, she said coolly, I'll be there by noon. I hung up and looked at Wolfe. You think she'll break? She will not need to, Wolfe replied, eyes gleaming. The truth, once provoked, confesses itself. Our task is merely to provide the provocation. Chapter 6, The Heiress Returns. By the time the clock struck noon, Wolfe's office looked less like a detective's den and more like a stage set for judgment. The curtains were half drawn, the light subdued, and Wolfe sat squarely behind his mahogany desk, immovable as a mountain. Fritz had brewed fresh coffee, strong enough to wake the dead, and set out a plate of pastries that Wolfe would later ignore entirely. He was saving his appetite for truth. At 12:15 sharp, Diana Kersey arrived. She swept in wearing a cream suit, pearls at her throat, and an expression that tried too hard to be calm. Her perfume lingered faintly in the air, jasmine, not cyanide. Mr. Wolfe, she greeted, voice smooth. You said you had something of my sister's? Wolfe inclined his head. Indeed, Miss Kersey. Please, sit. She took a chair opposite him. I leaned against the wall with my notepad, playing the casual observer. Wolfe never needed a jury, he built one from silence. He began softly, almost conversationally. "Tell me, Miss Kersey, have you heard from Evelyn since she disappeared?" Her eyes flicked up. "No." "Have you?" Indirectly, Wolfe said. "Through the residue of her choices." "I don't follow." "You will." He reached into his desk drawer and withdrew the perfume bottle. The glass glinted beneath the lamplight. "This arrived at your home 2 nights before her disappearance. You opened it." Diana's composure trembled for the briefest second. "Yes. I wanted to check if it was what she ordered." "Ah," Wolfe murmured. "And you didn't notice the odor of almonds?" She blinked. "Almonds?" "Bitter almonds," I said quietly. "Cyanide. A subtle but final perfume." Diana's color drained. "That's absurd." "You think I—" Wolfe lifted a hand. "I think nothing yet. But your sister's friend, Mississippi Lane, confirmed that the bottle was tampered with at a warehouse connected to Julian Brandt. She also confirmed that Evelyn discovered certain documents implicating your family business in chemical fraud. That, Miss Kersey, is not absurd, it's fact." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Wolfe continued in the same measured tone. "Evelyn disappeared because she believed someone in her circle wished her harm. You hired me, I suspect, to divert attention from yourself, to ensure the search stayed contained. Tell me, did you expect us to find her, or simply to declare her gone forever?" Diana rose from her seat, trembling. "I don't have to listen to this." "Sit down," Wolfe said quietly, and to my amazement, she did. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the authority of truth itself. "I have endured the posturing of the innocent," he said, "but I find yours particularly dull. Let me be precise. The inheritance clause in your father's will transfers full control of Kersey Holdings to you only in the event that Evelyn cannot be found within 30 days. Correct?" Her silence was answer enough. Wolfe nodded. "Convenient timing, then, a disappearance without a body, without closure, just long enough to make you rich." Diana buried her face in her hands. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I never meant to hurt her. I only wanted her to sign over her share, to protect the company. Brandt convinced me it was the only way." I shot Wolfe a look. He didn't move. "Brandt persuaded you to frighten your sister?" Wolfe asked. "He said they'd both be safe if she vanished for a while. He handled the details. The letter, the courier, everything. I didn't know he meant to kill her." "Yet you helped him," Wolfe said. Tears streaked her makeup. "He said the authorities would destroy us if Evelyn exposed the ledgers. Father's partners were still active, dangerous men. If she spoke, it would ruin everything." "Ruin," Wolfe repeated, "is an overused word among the privileged. What you mean is exposure." She looked up. "Then where is she now? If she's alive, tell me." Wolfe glanced at me. I nodded and stepped toward the door. "Bring her in, Archie." The color drained from Diana's face. "What?" The door opened. Gloria Lane entered, her arms still bandaged but her step steady. And behind her, wearing a gray coat and a quiet expression, came Evelyn Kersey. Alive. Pale, thinner, but alive. Diana gasped, half rising from her chair. "Evelyn." Evelyn stopped a few feet away, her eyes cool and unreadable. "Hello, sister." For a long moment, no one spoke. Even Wolfe allowed the silence to breathe, as if giving guilt room to fill the air. Finally Evelyn said, I didn't plan to come back. I was safe. But Gloria convinced me that running would let him win. Brant? Wolfe asked. She nodded. He forged contracts using our father's name to funnel military chemicals overseas. I found the papers. When I threatened to report it, he turned on me. Diana, she looked at her sister, voice trembling now, you knew, didn't you? Diana sobbed. I thought he'd only scare you. He said he'd take care of everything. He almost did, Evelyn said. With poison. Wolfe finally spoke again. Miss Kersey, he said, addressing Evelyn, I suggest you deliver those documents to the police immediately. Mississippi Lane has already provided her statement. Mr. Brant will be charged with attempted murder, smuggling, and conspiracy. Your sister, depending on her cooperation, may find leniency. Diana turned toward him in despair. Please, I'll tell them everything. I just didn't want to lose everything Father built. Then consider this, Wolfe said, voice even. You already have. Greed builds nothing that survives honesty. She broke down completely, and Evelyn went to her, kneeling beside her chair. For all her pain, there was no hatred in her face, only sorrow. You could have told me the truth, she whispered. We could have faced it together. I was afraid, Diana said. And fear makes monsters of us all. Wolfe looked away, uncomfortable with displays of emotion. He gestured toward me. Archie, call Inspector Kramer. He will want to collect our guests and the evidence before my orchids wilt from the drama. Right away, I said, though I caught the faintest twitch of a smile behind his irritation. That night, the brownstone was quiet again. The air was heavy with the scent of Fritz's midnight roast and Wolfe's satisfaction. Well, I said, setting down my notebook, that wraps it up neatly, 2 sisters, 1 crook, and enough family guilt to fill a novel. Wolfe poured himself a glass of beer. Nonsense. Nothing wraps neatly, Archie. It merely ceases to unravel before one grows tired of the thread. I grinned. You mean we got lucky? He sipped his beer. Luck is merely foresight exercised promptly. He leaned back, closing his eyes. Still, it pleases me that Miss Evelyn chose truth over comfort. She'll need courage for what comes next. And Diana? I asked. She'll have remorse, Wolfe said softly. That is punishment enough. He gestured toward the lamp. Turn off the light, Archie. I believe I've earned darkness. I did, and for a moment, the brownstone was still, the kind of stillness that comes only after the truth has spoken for itself. Chapter 7, The Final Confession. 3 days passed since the sisters' reunion, and for once, the brownstone was quiet. Too quiet. No visitors, no calls, no cigar smoke clouding the room, just the rhythmic creak of Wolfe's chair and the faint hum of the city beyond our walls. Inspector Kramer had come and gone, furious as ever but forced to admit Wolfe had been right again. Brant was sitting in a holding cell, his jaw wired shut, shouting threats no one took seriously. Diana Kersey was under house arrest, cooperating to save what was left of her reputation. Evelyn, meanwhile, had vanished once more, this time into protective custody. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when the silence broke. The front bell rang, sharp, insistent. Fritz poked his head into the office. A gentleman to see you, Mr. Wolfe. He says it's urgent. Name? Wolfe asked without looking up from his orchids. Detective Roy Miller. That got Wolfe's attention. Ah. Our elusive man in blue. Show him in. A moment later, Miller entered. He was tall, lean, and dressed like a man who didn't trust comfort, wrinkled trench coat, tired eyes, and the kind of expression that said he'd seen too much and cared too little. He nodded to me, then to Wolfe. "Mr. Wolfe," he said. "We need to talk. Alone." "Mr. Goodwin stays," Wolfe said, settling into his chair. "He's more adept at remembering inconvenient truths than most policemen." Miller gave me a look but said nothing. "Fine. I'll get straight to it. Julian Brandt's been talking. Claims the Kersey sisters were pawns, says someone else financed his smuggling ring." Wolfe's eyes opened. "Indeed. And did he name this mysterious benefactor?" Miller pulled out a small notebook. "Not yet. But he mentioned a code name, Black Triangle. We found it stamped on several of his private ledgers." I sat forward. "We saw that same symbol at the warehouse, Black Triangle, number 47C. Miller nodded. "It's bigger than Brandt. Those chemicals were being rerouted overseas, not for perfume, but for weapons development." Wolfe's tone darkened. "So we are dealing not with greed alone, but treason." "Exactly," Miller said. "And here's the part that concerns you. Someone on the inside tipped them off about Evelyn's movements before she vanished. Someone who knew every step of her plan." I frowned. "You think there's another leak?" "I don't think," Miller said. "I know. The courier who delivered that perfume bottle, the one who worked under Brandt, was murdered last night." The room fell silent. Wolfe's fingers stopped their rhythmic tapping. "How convenient," he murmured. "The one man who might have traced the chain of delivery is now silenced." Miller nodded grimly. "And before he died, he said one name, yours." Wolfe's eyebrows rose. "Mine?" "He said he was paid by a man named Wolfe to deliver the package." I let out a sharp laugh. "That's ridiculous." "Of course it is," Miller said. "But someone's trying to frame you." Wolfe's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed. "Then they've chosen a dangerous opponent. Tell me, detective, where are Brandt's ledgers now?" "In evidence lockup," Miller said. "But the pages on the financial transactions are missing." "Then we may assume our true culprit has already struck again," Wolfe said. "Someone with access, intelligence, and motive." He reached for his beer, took a long sip, and muttered, "Archie, the Kersey house, if you please. Miss Diana is likely entertaining visitors." An hour later, I was on Long Island again, the gray sky pressing down like a lid. The estate looked smaller now, stripped of glamour, its windows blank as guilt. The butler let me in with a polite nod, though I could tell the place had changed. Servants whispered, curtains were half drawn, and somewhere in the distance, a piano played a mournful tune that stopped as soon as I entered. Diana sat in the library, pale but composed. "Mr. Goodwin," she said softly. "Has something happened?" "You tell me," I replied. "Inspector Miller's investigating a new angle, and a missing book of ledgers. I was wondering if anyone's been here recently." Her hands clenched the armrest. "No. Only my attorney." "Which one?" "Frederick Ames," she said. "He handled Father's estate." "Why?" "Because the name hit me like a punch. Frederick Ames, the man who notarized Malcolm Kersey's will, managed the company finances, and just happened to control every wire transfer in and out of Kersey Holdings." I smiled. "Just curious." She looked uneasy. Is there another danger? There always is, I said, and left before she could answer. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was waiting, eyes half closed as if he'd been expecting me to connect the dots. Ames, I said. Yes, Wolfe murmured. The ghost in the ledger. The man who made Kersey Steel solvent through creative accounting, and ensured its debts vanished when Malcolm died. A man clever enough to hide corruption inside legitimate books, and foolish enough to think he could erase it by killing witnesses. I frowned. He killed the courier? Undoubtedly. And he used Brant as his decoy, a loud, flashy intermediary to draw suspicion while he controlled the flow of money in silence. And now he's covering his tracks. Precisely. Archie, you will telephone Miss Evelyn Kersey. Tell her she is no longer safe in custody. Mr. Ames will seek her next. I hesitated. You're sure? I am never sure, Wolfe said. I am merely correct. That night, the trap was set. We arranged a meeting at Wolfe's brownstone under the pretext of reviewing financial recovery documents. Wolfe invited Ames personally, with the subtle charm of a spider inviting a fly. Kramer and Miller waited in the back room, ready to pounce. At exactly 8 o'clock, Frederick Ames arrived. He was tall, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, with the kind of polite smile that had probably conned half of Wall Street. Mr. Wolfe, he said smoothly, thank you for seeing me. I understand you've been investigating unpleasant rumors about my clients. Rumors? Wolfe said mildly. You refer, I assume, to the disappearance of Miss Evelyn Kersey, or the shipment of poison you helped conceal. Ames froze, the mask slipping. I beg your pardon. Wolfe's voice was low, deliberate. You financed Julian Brant's operation, filtered profits through Kersey accounts, and silenced anyone who could expose you. But you made one error. Ames's hand twitched. And what error is that? You underestimated me, Wolfe said. The door burst open. Miller stepped out, badge flashing. Frederick Ames, you're under arrest. Ames's composure cracked. You can't prove anything. Wolfe nodded toward me. I held up the final piece, a letter Gloria had found in Brant's files, bearing Ames's signature, authorizing chemical transfers consistent with Kersey project funding. The black triangle was embossed at the top. Ames sagged. You don't understand. It was business. Only business. Wolfe sighed. It always is. Miller cuffed him and led him out without ceremony. When the door closed, Wolfe reached for his beer. Another man of intellect without conscience, he muttered. A common plague. So it's finished? I asked. Nearly, he said. But there remains one more confession yet to be made. I raised an eyebrow. Whose? Mine, he said softly. For allowing human folly to become so predictable that it no longer surprises me. He leaned back, eyes weary but satisfied. Still, I suppose that's progress. Chapter 8, The Orchid and the Oath. The following morning broke pale and clean over West 35th Street, the kind of New York morning that pretends nothing terrible ever happens here. The newspapers hadn't caught up yet. Frederick Ames's arrest was still a rumor, Brant's face hadn't made the front page. For once, the world lagged behind Nero Wolfe. Inside the brownstone, order had returned with military precision. Fritz hummed in the kitchen, the orchids basked in their warm mist, and Wolfe sat at his desk reading Les Miserables with the same detachment he used when dissecting crime. I was cataloging the evidence for Kramer when the phone rang. "Goodwin," I said. A familiar voice answered. "It's Evelyn Kersey. May I speak with Mr. Wolfe?" I handed him the receiver. "Miss Kersey," he said, his tone neither warm nor cold, "I trust you are safe." "Yes," she replied. "Detective Miller said it's over, but I can't quite believe it. I wanted to thank you, both of you." Wolfe closed the book softly. "Gratitude is unnecessary. You hired reason, not mercy." "I'll send a proper letter," she said, trying to sound steady. "And a check." "That," Wolfe murmured, "is unnecessary but acceptable." When he hung up, he exhaled a long, slow breath, as though the case had been a particularly stubborn weed finally uprooted. "Archie," he said, "remind me never again to engage with families who inherit steel." "I'll note it between your other resolutions you never keep," I said. He ignored me and rang for Fritz. "Bring the Montenegrin brandy. I believe I've earned indulgence." By afternoon, the inevitable visit arrived. Inspector Kramer stomped in like a storm cloud, his hat clutched in one hand, cigar in the other. "Wolfe," he growled, "I don't know whether to thank you or throttle you. You cracked a smuggling ring that's been running for 3 years, and didn't bother telling us until it was gift-wrapped." Wolfe smiled faintly. "You're welcome." Kramer threw the cigar into the ashtray. Ames confessed. Said he funneled the money through dummy corporations, used Brandt for distribution. Claimed he did it to protect national interests. "Every scoundrel imagines patriotism forgives arithmetic," Wolfe said. Kramer snorted. "And the sisters?" "Miss Diana cooperates," Wolfe replied. "Her confession corroborates Brandt's ledger entries. She'll receive leniency." Kramer rubbed his forehead. "You know, Wolfe, one day I'm gonna walk in here and find you solved a murder before it even happened." Wolfe lifted his glass. "When that day comes, Inspector, I shall retire." Kramer grunted, almost a laugh, and left. The rest of the day slid by quietly. I filed statements, burned duplicates, and watched the late sunlight pour through the windows, dust motes dancing like tired witnesses finally at peace. Around 6, a knock at the door startled both of us. It was Gloria Lane. She looked healthier, her bandaged arm resting easily at her side. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "Evelyn's free, the company's being cleaned up, and Brandt, well, he's not charming anyone anymore." "You risked a great deal," Wolfe told her. "You deserve credit, though I doubt you'll enjoy it. Heroism rarely ages well." She smiled faintly. "I'm planning to disappear for a while, this time by choice." "A wise decision," Wolfe said. "If you must vanish, do it honestly." When she left, the brownstone grew quiet again. Later that night, Wolfe sat with his orchids while I typed the final report. The air was rich with the scent of damp soil and satisfaction. "You ever notice," I said, "how every case ends the same way? Somebody thinks money buys silence, somebody else thinks love excuses lying, and you end up proving both are wrong." He glanced up. "You find this repetitive?" "I find it profitable," I said. "But it gets you thinking, why do people keep trying the same mistakes?" "Because," Wolfe said, adjusting a blossom, "fools believe circumstance creates corruption. It doesn't. It merely reveals it." "Deep," I said. "You planning to write a philosophy book next?" He gave me the look that usually ends conversations, or lives. At 9 o'clock, the bell rang again. This time it was Evelyn herself. She looked calmer now, dressed simply, her eyes clearer. Fritz showed her in, and she stood before Wolfe's desk with quiet grace. "I wanted to see you in person," she said. "To tell you the truth about my father." Wolfe nodded once. "The truth seldom surprises me, but proceed." She clasped her hands. "He wasn't the monster they say. He made mistakes, terrible ones, but he wanted to undo them. The ledgers I found were his attempt to expose the corruption before it consumed the company. Ames found out first. That's why he had to die." Wolfe's gaze softened slightly. "Then your father's final act was an effort at redemption. I can respect that." She smiled faintly. "You see everything so clearly, Mr. Wolfe. But I wonder, do you ever feel anything?" He looked almost amused. "Occasionally irritation. More rarely, relief." "I'll take that as a yes." She handed him an envelope. "A formal retainer and a small donation for your orchids. Consider it gratitude from a family trying to rebuild." He accepted it with a nod. "Your generosity will not go unappreciated, by the orchids." When she left, he watched her go until the sound of her footsteps faded down the hall. "Archie," he said softly, "that young woman possesses what money cannot purchase." "Courage?" I asked. "Conscience," he said. "The rarer bloom." Around midnight, the city outside had gone to sleep, but Wolfe remained awake. I found him in the plant room, standing among rows of orchids glowing under soft light. He was holding one, white with a crimson throat, studying it as though it held the answer to something only he could ask. I leaned in the doorway. "You ever get tired of being right?" He didn't turn. "Truth is not a matter of fatigue, Archie. Only patience." He placed the orchid back in its pot and faced me. "Each case reminds me why I prefer flowers. They deceive only by beauty, not intent." "Yeah," I said. "But they don't pay retainers." "That," he admitted, "is why I keep you." I grinned. "And here I thought it was my charm." "Your charm," he said, "is as tolerable as your timing. Which is to say, barely." I laughed, turned off the light, and followed him back to the office. The night settled around the brownstone like a satisfied sigh. Wolfe poured his final glass of beer, lifted it slightly toward the dark window, and said, "To the vanished who return, and the guilty who do not." "Cheers to that," I said. He drank, set the glass down, and closed his eyes. Outside, somewhere in the restless city, a siren wailed and faded. Inside, Nero Wolfe slept, surrounded by silence, orchids, and the quiet certainty that once again, logic had triumphed over lies. And that, I suppose, is as close to peace as New York ever gets.